Captain Zara stepped onto the bridge of her diplomatic ship, the Star Weaver, and felt something she'd never experienced in her 20 years of space travel: complete silence from Earth. Her blue-scaled hands moved across the control panel, checking the communication systems for the third time in an hour. "Still nothing, Captain," reported her communications officer, a tall being with crystalline features that sparkled under the bridge lights. "No radio signals, no television broadcasts, no internet traffic. It's like someone turned off a switch." Zara's heart sank. She had been looking forward to this moment for months. Today was supposed to be special, the day humans would officially join the Galactic Council. After decades of watching Earth from afar, the Council had finally decided that humanity was ready to take its place among the stars. But something had gone terribly wrong. The Star Weaver glided through Earth's solar system, past the red planet, Mars, where human colonies should have been buzzing with activity. The settlements were there, but they looked abandoned. Solar panels still gleamed in the sunlight, and the dome structures appeared intact, but no life signs registered on there. "Scanners, take us to Earth orbit," Zara commanded, her voice steady despite the growing worry in her chest. As Earth grew larger in the view screen, Zara could see the familiar blue and green planet that had fascinated galactic scientists for generations. The white clouds swirled in normal patterns, and the continents looked exactly as they should, but something felt deeply wrong. "Life signs?" she asked hopefully. Her science officer, a gentle being with fur-like covering and large, intelligent eyes, shook his head slowly. "Animal life is present and normal, but human life signs—" He paused, checking his instruments again. "Captain, I'm not detecting any human life anywhere on the planet." The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Zara had seen many strange things in her career, but entire civilizations didn't just disappear. It was impossible. "Take us down to the surface," she ordered. "We need to see this for ourselves." The Star Weaver descended through Earth's atmosphere, heading toward what humans called New York City. As they broke through the clouds, the massive city spread out below them like a giant maze of steel and glass. Everything looked normal from above. The buildings stood tall, the bridges spanned the rivers, and vehicles sat parked in orderly rows. But as they flew lower, the strangeness became obvious. Traffic lights continued their endless cycle of red, yellow, and green, but no cars moved through the intersections. Digital billboards flashed bright advertisements for products, but no one walked the sidewalks below to see them. Parks and playgrounds sat empty, swings moving gently in the breeze with no children to push them. "Land us in that open area," Zara pointed to what appeared to be a large park in the center of the city. The ship touched down with barely a whisper. Zara suited up in her environment gear, though Earth's atmosphere was perfectly safe for her species. She needed to be careful. Whatever had happened to the humans might still be dangerous. Stepping out onto the grass, Zara was struck by how peaceful everything seemed. Birds sang in the trees above, and small animals scurried through the underbrush. The air smelled clean and fresh. But the absence of human voices, human laughter, or human activity created an eerie atmosphere that made her skin crawl. She walked toward the nearest street, her team of specialists following behind. Cars sat abandoned in the middle of the road, their doors open as if their drivers had simply vanished mid-journey. In one vehicle, she found a half-eaten sandwich still sitting on the passenger seat, as if someone had been interrupted during lunch. "Look at this," called her medical officer from across the street. He stood beside a bus stop where several bags and belongings lay scattered on the ground. Personal items, but no people. It's as if they just disappeared. Zara examined a coffee shop they passed. The front door was propped open, and inside, cups of coffee sat on tables, still half full. A newspaper lay folded next to one cup, its headlines talking about upcoming elections and weather predictions. Everything suggested normal human life, interrupted suddenly and completely. The team spent hours walking through the city, documenting what they found. Every discovery raised more questions. In an office building, computers still hummed quietly, their screens showing half-finished emails and spreadsheets. In a school, children's artwork hung on classroom walls, and textbooks lay open on desks. A hospital's automated systems continued caring for empty beds, monitoring equipment beeping steadily in vacant rooms. "Captain," her communications officer's voice crackled through the radio. "I'm picking up the last recorded human transmission. It's from a weather station in the southern continent." "Play it," Zara responded, hoping for some clue about what had happened. A calm human voice filled their communicators. "Weather station Antarctica reporting. Current temperature -15 degrees, wind from the southeast at 12 knots, conditions normal. Next report scheduled for 0600 hours tomorrow." The message was completely ordinary, exactly the kind of routine communication that humans sent thousands of times each day. But it was time-stamped exactly 3 days ago, and it was the last human voice anyone would ever hear. As the sun began to set over the empty city, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. She had spent her career studying different civilizations, understanding how they grew and changed and sometimes fell. But this was different. Civilizations died from war, disease, natural disasters, or gradual decline. They didn't just vanish without leaving any trace of struggle or exodus. Back aboard the Star Weaver, Zara composed her report to the Galactic Council. How do you explain the impossible? How do you tell the leaders of 1,000 worlds that an entire species had simply stopped existing? Open a channel to Council headquarters, she ordered. The familiar face of Archon Veltar appeared on the screen, his ancient features showing the wisdom of countless centuries. Behind him, Zara could see other council members gathering, their various forms representing species from across the galaxy. "Ambassador Zara." The Archon's voice was warm, but concerned. "We've been expecting your report. How did the human induction ceremony proceed?" Zara took a deep breath. "Archon, there was no ceremony. The humans are gone, all of them. Every human on Earth, on their moon bases, on Mars. They've all disappeared. Not dead, not relocated. Simply gone. As if they never existed." The silence that followed was deafening. She could see the shock and disbelief on the faces of beings who had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations for thousands of years. "That's impossible," whispered a representative from the Shard Collective, her crystalline body flickering with confused lights. "Entire species don't just disappear." "I know," Zara replied quietly. "But I'm looking at an entire world that proves otherwise." The implications began settling over everyone like a dark cloud. If humans could vanish so completely, what did that mean for the rest of the galaxy? What force could make an entire civilization disappear without a trace? And most frightening of all, could it happen to them too? As the meeting ended and the channel closed, Zara remained on the bridge, staring out at Earth's peaceful surface. Somewhere down there lay the answer to humanity's disappearance. But finding that answer might reveal truths that the galaxy wasn't ready to face. The greatest mystery in galactic history had just begun, and Zara had the unsettling feeling that humanity's disappearance was only the beginning of something much larger and more terrifying than anyone could imagine. 3 days later, the largest investigation team in galactic history arrived at Earth. Leading them was Detective Keth, a brilliant investigator whose species was famous for their logical thinking and attention to detail. His gray, smooth skin and large black eyes had seen countless mysteries solved, but nothing had prepared him for this. "I want every building, every vehicle, every room examined," Keth announced to his team of 50 specialists as their massive research vessel entered Earth's orbit. Someone doesn't just make 7 billion people disappear. There has to be evidence somewhere. The team spread across the planet like ants, each group taking different cities and regions. They brought with them the most advanced scanning equipment in the galaxy, devices that could detect the smallest traces of energy, analyze particles invisible to most species, and even sense the echoes of past events. Dr. Thane, the team's expert on time and space, set up his equipment in what humans had called Times Square. The massive digital screens still blazed with colorful advertisements, but the streets below remained hauntingly empty. As his scanners hummed to life, strange readings immediately appeared on his displays. "This is incredible," he muttered, adjusting his instruments. "I'm detecting quantum signatures everywhere, traces of massive energy manipulation, but the patterns—" He paused, running the data through his computer again. These patterns suggest reality itself was changed here. Meanwhile, across the planet in London, Dr. Lyra was having her own disturbing discoveries. As a specialist in consciousness and minds, she could sense things that others couldn't. Walking through the empty streets, she felt something that made her tentacles curl with unease. "There are echoes," she reported to the team. "Consciousness echoes. The humans didn't die. Their minds were translated. Moved somewhere else." Back in New York, Detective Keth was examining security footage from thousands of cameras across the city. What he found made his logical mind struggle to accept what he was seeing. The footage from 3 days ago showed normal human life until exactly 14:32 to 17 local time. Then, in perfect synchronization across every camera in the city, something impossible happened. The humans began to fade. It wasn't sudden like an explosion or gradual like falling asleep. They became transparent, like ghosts, then simply weren't there anymore. A businessman walking down the street became see-through mid-step, his briefcase falling to the ground as he vanished. Children playing in a park flickered like holograms, before disappearing completely. In restaurants, people faded away while holding forks halfway to their mouths. "Show me footage from other cities," Keth demanded. The results were identical everywhere. London, Tokyo, Sydney, Cairo. At exactly the same moment, adjusted for time zones, every human on Earth had simply dissolved into nothingness. The entire event lasted exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds. "Sir," called one of his technicians, "you need to see this." The young officer had been analyzing the quantum signatures Dr. Thane had discovered. On his screen was a 3-dimensional map of Earth showing energy patterns from that fateful day. The entire planet was covered in a web of strange energy, all connecting to a single point. "Where does it lead?" Keth asked. "Switzerland, sir. To a place called CERN." The investigation team converged on the underground facility that had once been humanity's most advanced scientific research center. CERN was a massive complex of tunnels and chambers built to study the smallest particles in the universe. But as the team descended into the depths, they found something that shouldn't have existed: the particle accelerator, a giant ring-shaped tunnel that stretched for miles underground, had been modified far beyond anything humans should have been capable of building. Strange crystalline structures grew from the walls like metallic trees. Devices hummed with unknown energy. The very air itself seemed to shimmer with otherworldly power. "These modifications," Dr. Thane whispered, running his scanners over the alien technology. "This isn't human engineering. Someone else built this." Detective Keth studied the modifications carefully. His logical mind cataloged every detail, every impossible curve and structure. "When were these changes made?" he asked. Dr. Thane checked his temporal scanners. "The final modifications were completed approximately 6 hours before the human disappearance. But, sir, the energy signatures, they're not from our dimension." As the team explored deeper into the facility, they found research laboratories filled with projects that human science shouldn't have been able to conceive. Documents, written in human languages, described experiments with dimensional barriers and consciousness transfer protocols. Computer files contained communications with entities identified only as the Collective. Dr. Lyra, studying the consciousness echoes in the facility, suddenly stopped walking. Her tentacles turned pale with shock. "Detective!" she called, her voice trembling. "I can sense what happened here. In the final hours, humans weren't alone in this facility. There were other minds here, minds from somewhere else entirely. The investigation team worked through the night, piecing together humanity's final days. The evidence painted an incredible picture. Somehow, humans had made contact with beings from another dimension. These entities had helped them modify their primitive technology into something capable of affecting reality itself. But the most shocking discovery came when they found humanity's final communications with these mysterious beings. In a shielded computer deep within CERN, they discovered video recordings of humanity's last conversations with the Collective. The recordings showed human scientists, their faces filled with both fear and wonder, speaking to empty air. But the audio revealed voices responding, voices that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "The harvest approaches your galaxy," the alien voices said in perfect human languages. "Physical existence will become impossible. You have been chosen because your species possesses the chaos necessary for transcendence." "What about the others?" a human scientist asked. "The other species in our galaxy?" "They will face the same choice when their time comes. Evolve beyond flesh or face consumption. Your chaotic nature makes you ideal candidates. Most species are too ordered, too logical. You alone can exist in multiple states simultaneously." The recordings revealed that humanity had been given a choice: remain on Earth and face destruction when something called the harvest arrived, or allow their consciousness to be transferred to a higher dimension where they could continue to exist. Detective Keth played the final recording for his team. It showed the lead human scientist, a woman with graying hair and tired eyes, making humanity's ultimate decision. "We accept," she said simply. "Transfer us all." "The process will be immediate and irreversible," the Collective responded. "Are you prepared?" "We are." And then the recording ended. Back on their ship, Detective Keth compiled his report for the Galactic Council. But even as he wrote, new information was arriving from deep space monitoring stations. Strange gravitational anomalies were being detected at the galaxy's edge. Something massive was moving through space, something that bent reality around it. As he finished his report, Keth realized that humanity's disappearance wasn't an isolated incident. It was a warning. The harvest that the Collective had mentioned was real, and it was coming for all of them. The investigation had answered the question of what happened to humanity, but it had raised a far more terrifying question. What was going to happen to everyone else? The galaxy's peaceful existence was about to end, and humanity had already escaped to somewhere the rest of them couldn't follow. Yet, the Grand Council chamber had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 1,000 worlds filled the massive circular hall, their voices creating a symphony of concern and fear. At the center, Archon Veltar raised his ancient hand for silence, but the debates continued to rage. "Order! We must have order!" The Archon's voice boomed through the chamber's speakers. Ambassador Zara watched from her designated seat as the galactic community tore itself apart over humanity's fate. What had started as a simple investigation had become the greatest crisis the galaxy had ever faced. The evidence was undeniable. Humans had vanished after making contact with beings from another dimension, but what that meant for everyone else was where the arguments began. Council member Jorik of the Crystal Collective stood first, his translucent body shimmering with angry red lights. "We should seal off the Earth system immediately," he declared. "Whatever those humans awakened, we cannot allow it to spread. They've brought something dangerous into our galaxy." Murmurs of agreement rippled through one section of the chamber. These were the preservationists, species who believed that safety lay in isolation and forgetting that humanity had ever existed. But from across the chamber, Dr. Nala of the Research Guild stood to oppose him. Her 4 arms gestured emphatically as she spoke. Ignorance will not protect us. If this threat is real, we need to understand it. The humans' modifications at CERN represent technology beyond anything we've seen. We must study it. More voices joined hers. Scientists, explorers, and researchers from dozens of worlds. They called themselves the Investigation Alliance, convinced that knowledge was their only weapon against the unknown. Then a third voice cut through the debate, young and passionate. Captain Rin of the New Worlds Federation stepped forward, her silver skin gleaming under the chamber's lights. "You're all missing the point," she said boldly. "What if the humans didn't disappear? What if they evolved?" The chamber fell silent. It was a shocking suggestion, but Rin continued with growing confidence. "Think about it. They weren't taken against their will. They chose this. The recordings show they were offered a chance to transcend physical existence. Maybe humanity didn't die. Maybe they became something greater." This idea sparked an entirely new faction, the Ascensionists. Younger species, those still reaching for the stars, began to see humanity's disappearance not as a tragedy, but as an achievement. They whispered among themselves about the possibility of evolution beyond flesh and bone. Archon Veltar watched the 3-way split with growing concern. In his thousands of years of life, he had seen the Council disagree on many issues, but never had it fractured so completely. He called for a recess, hoping time would cool the heated emotions. During the break, Detective Keth approached the Archon with troubling news. "Sir, I need to show you something. We've discovered that humanity's disappearance isn't the first incident of its kind." In a private chamber, Keth presented classified files that had been buried in the Council's deepest archives. Over the past 1,000 years, we've had reports of individuals and small groups vanishing with identical quantum signatures. A merchant ship crew near the Vega system, a research team studying black holes, a monastery of monks from the peaceful worlds, all gone without a trace. The Archon studied the files, his expression growing darker. Why wasn't this information shared? The previous council classified it to prevent panic. Each incident was dismissed as an anomaly, a rare accident. But now, Keth gestured toward the main chamber where debates still raged. Now we know they were all connected. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the Investigation Alliance's secret research team had made a breakthrough. Dr. Thane had spent weeks analyzing the alien modifications at CERN, and his discoveries were revolutionary. The technology isn't just influenced by dimensional beings, he reported to his team. It was completed by them. Look at these energy patterns. The final modifications were made in the 6 hours before humanity vanished. The entities were actively helping them. His colleague, Dr. Lyra, had been studying the consciousness echoes left behind. "I can sense the final moments," she said, her tentacles curling with concentration. The humans weren't afraid. They were excited, hopeful. They saw this as a rescue, not a kidnapping. The team worked frantically to reconstruct humanity's last day. Through careful analysis of quantum residue and consciousness traces, they pieced together an incredible story. The dimensional entities, calling themselves the Collective, had presented humanity with evidence of an approaching cosmic threat. Something vast and terrible was moving through the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. The humans had been given a choice: remain and face certain destruction, or allow their consciousness to be transferred to a higher dimensional state where they could survive. After heated debates among their world leaders, humanity had chosen transcendence. But the most shocking discovery came when Dr. Thane detected gravitational anomalies at the galaxy's edge. "It's not coming," he whispered, staring at his instruments. "It's already here." Long-range sensors showed spatial distortions moving slowly but steadily through the outer star systems. Whatever the humans had been warned about was real, and it was already affecting distant worlds. Back at the Council, this news shattered any remaining unity. The preservationists demanded immediate defensive measures. The Investigation Alliance wanted to study the approaching threat. The Ascensionists began openly discussing whether they should contact the collective themselves. Captain Rin stood before a group of young representatives from various worlds. "Don't you see?" she said passionately. "Humanity saw the future and chose evolution over extinction. They became pure consciousness, free from the limitations of physical bodies. That's not death, that's transcendence." But her words frightened as many as they inspired. Council member Vex of the Ancient Worlds spoke for those who couldn't accept such a radical change. "We are what we are because of our physical forms. Our cultures, our art, our very souls are tied to our bodies. To abandon flesh is to abandon everything that makes us who we are." The debate raged for days. Some species began withdrawing from the Council entirely, choosing to return to their home worlds and prepare their own defenses. Others formed secret research groups, trying to decode the dimensional technology. A few brave souls even attempted to make contact with the collective, hoping to learn more about transcendence. During all this chaos, Captain Zara found herself thinking about the empty earth below. She had walked through those silent cities, seen the half-eaten meals and open books. Humanity had lived, loved, laughed, and dreamed just like every other species. Now they existed in some form beyond physical reality. Were they still human? Did they remember their old lives? Were they happy with their choice? As she pondered these questions, alarms suddenly blared throughout the Council station. Emergency broadcasts filled every screen and speaker. "Gravitational anomaly detected in the Proxima system," the automated voice announced. "All ships maintain safe distance. Reality distortion field approaching inhabited worlds." Through the station's massive windows, Zara could see the impossible. Space itself seemed to be unraveling at the galaxy's edge. Stars flickered and went out, not destroyed, but somehow ceasing to exist. The cosmic threat that humanity had fled was no longer a distant possibility. It was here. The Council's debates suddenly seemed petty in the face of galactic annihilation. Whether they chose preservation, investigation, or ascension, they needed to choose quickly. The wave of destruction was moving toward them, and unlike humanity, they hadn't been offered an escape route. Yet, in the depths of the CERN facility on Earth, alien technology continued to hum with otherworldly energy. The portal that had saved humanity remained active, waiting. But was it salvation, or simply another form of extinction? And most importantly, was there still time to make the choice humanity had already made? The galaxy's fate hung in the balance, and the clock was ticking toward an ending that might be the only beginning left. The emergency alarms hadn't stopped ringing for 3 days. Across the galaxy, civilizations that had existed for millions of years watched their outer colonies simply cease to exist. Not destroyed, not abandoned. They just stopped being real. Captain. Zara stood in the Council's crisis center, watching holographic displays that showed the advancing wave of destruction. Each red dot on the map represented a star system that had already been consumed. The pattern was clear and terrifying. The wave moved steadily inward, leaving nothing but empty space behind. "How long do we have?" asked Dr. Nala, her 4 hands, trembling as she studied the data. "At current speed, it will reach the core worlds in 50 years, replied the station's computer. However, the consumption rate appears to be accelerating. 50 years. It sounded like a long time, but for civilizations that measured their existence in millennia, it was barely a heartbeat. And now they knew what humanity had known. This wasn't just another cosmic disaster they could survive or avoid. This was the end of everything. The crisis deepened when long-range scouts reported impossible sights from the consumed regions. Space itself had changed. The fundamental laws of physics no longer worked properly. Matter existed in states that shouldn't be possible. Time moved differently, sometimes backwards, sometimes not at all. Then, as if responding to the galaxy's growing desperation, the dimensional entities that had saved humanity finally revealed themselves to the Council. It happened during an emergency session in the main chamber. The air suddenly shimmered, and geometric patterns of light began forming in the center of the room. The patterns shifted and flowed, creating shapes that hurt to look at directly. When they finally stabilized, a voice spoke, not through the air, but directly into every mind present. "We are the collective," the voice said, somehow speaking in each listener's native language simultaneously. "We are the survivors of the Andromeda Galaxy, which faced this same harvest 3,000 years ago." The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Andromeda, a neighboring galaxy that had mysteriously gone dark centuries ago. Most had assumed it was simply too far away to study properly. The entity continued, its voice carrying impossible sadness and ancient wisdom. "What you call the harvest is a force older than stars. Reality harvesters move between galaxies, consuming the very foundation of existence. They do not destroy matter. They unweave the fabric that allows matter to exist." Ambassador Jorik of the Crystal Collective stood shakily. "What are they? Who controls them?" "They are not controlled. They are a natural function of the universe, like gravity or time. Physical reality must eventually give way to higher states of existence. The harvesters simply speed the process, recycling the energy of physical dimensions into pure consciousness." "Doctor," Thane leaned forward. "Then how did you survive?" The entity's patterns brightened. "We evolved beyond physical form before the harvest reached us, as did your humans. Consciousness can exist without matter, but it requires a specific type of mind, one capable of existing in multiple states simultaneously. Most species are too rigid in their thinking. Humans possess the chaos necessary for transcendence." The revelation stunned the Council. Humanity's chaotic nature, their contradictions and emotional complexity that other species had seen as weaknesses, had actually been their salvation. "Can you help us?" pleaded Captain Rin of the New Worlds. "Can you save our species like you saved humanity?" "Some of you, perhaps. But the process requires abandoning everything you understand about existence. Your bodies, your physical pleasures, your material possessions, all must be left behind. Many species find this more terrifying than destruction." Over the following days, the entity shared more disturbing truths. The reality harvesters had consumed thousands of galaxies over billions of years. Each time, only a few species possessed the mental flexibility needed for transcendence. The rest faced recycling, their matter and energy broken down and scattered across the universe. "Is there no other way?" asked Archon Veltar, his ancient voice heavy with sorrow. "No weapon or defense that can stop them? Physical weapons cannot affect beings that exist outside physical law. They operate at the quantum level, unmaking the very rules that govern your reality. Your only choices are transcendence or acceptance of recycling." The galaxy began to fracture. Some species, led by the energy beings of the ethereal realms, immediately began preparing for transcendence. Their natural state already existed partially outside normal space-time, making the transition easier to contemplate. Others refused to consider abandoning their physical forms. The builders of the Great Rings had spent millions of years constructing massive space habitats. The idea of leaving their creations behind was unbearable. They began developing increasingly desperate defensive technologies. The individual-minded species like the traders of the free worlds worried about losing their personal identities in a collective consciousness. The hive minds, like the Nexari, feared their unified nature might be disrupted during transcendence. Meanwhile, reports continued arriving from the galaxy's edge. Scout ships sent to study the harvest zones returned with crews that were no longer quite alive. They existed in a state between matter and energy, conscious but unable to interact properly with physical reality. The harvester's approach was changing people even before direct contact. Captain Zara found herself drawn repeatedly to Earth's surface. Walking through the silent human cities, she tried to imagine what it had been like for them in those final hours. Had they been afraid? Excited? Had they regretted their choice in the last moments before transcendence? In a children's library in what had been called Paris, she found a book left open on a reading table. It was a story about a caterpillar becoming a butterfly, transformation through apparent destruction. Had humanity seen themselves as caterpillars, ready to emerge from the cocoon of physical existence? The entity had explained that transcended consciousness could still observe physical reality, even influence it in subtle ways. Were the humans watching their old world? Could they see her walking through their abandoned homes? As she pondered these questions, her communication device chimed with an urgent message. Dr. Thane had made a breakthrough in understanding the transcendence technology, but his discovery brought more fear than hope. The process is irreversible, he explained to an emergency gathering of researchers. Once consciousness is separated from physical form, it can never return. There's no going back, no changing your mind. And worse, we still don't fully understand what transcended existence actually feels like. The humans seemed willing to take that risk, Dr. Lyra observed. The humans were facing certain destruction. They had nothing to lose. We still have 50 years. The question is whether we use that time to prepare for transcendence or search for alternatives. The debate that followed revealed the galaxy's growing desperation. Some argued for massive research projects to find a third option, neither transcendence nor destruction. Others wanted to begin transcendence preparations immediately. A few even suggested that 50 years of normal existence might be preferable to an eternity of unknown consciousness. But time was running out for discussion. Each day brought new reports of the harvest's advance. Outer colonies were being evacuated, though there was nowhere truly safe to go. Trade networks collapsed as species focused on their own survival. The great galactic civilization that had existed for millennia began to crumble. In the depths of space, ancient defensive networks activated for the first time in millions of years. Massive weapons platforms emerged from hidden locations, their builders long extinct but their programming still functional. Energy barriers designed to stop entire fleets powered up across critical star systems. None of it made any difference. The reality harvesters consumed defensive positions as easily as undefended worlds. They weren't fighting a war. They were performing a function as natural and unstoppable as the flow of time itself. As the situation grew more desperate, Captain Zara made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She volunteered to undergo experimental transcendence using the modified equipment at CERN. If it worked, she could report back on what transcended existence was actually like. If it failed, at least they would learn from her sacrifice. Standing in the alien-modified chamber beneath Earth's surface, surrounded by technology that bent reality itself, Zara felt the weight of an entire galaxy's future resting on her shoulders. The humans had taken this leap of faith based on trust alone. Now someone needed to follow them into the unknown and report back, if reporting back was even possible. The transcendence process began, and reality started to dissolve around her. The reality harvesters reached the galaxy's populated rim faster than anyone had predicted. What should have taken years happened in months. Entire star systems didn't just disappear. They unraveled like threads being pulled from a tapestry of existence. Captain Zara's transcendence experiment had succeeded, but not in the way anyone expected. She existed now in both states simultaneously. Part of her consciousness remained in physical form, while another part had joined the higher, dimensional realm where humanity waited. Through her, the galaxy finally learned what transcendence truly meant. "It's not death," she explained to the emergency council session, her voice carrying an otherworldly quality that made everyone listen. "It's like waking up from a dream you didn't know you were having. The humans are still themselves, but they're also more than they ever were before." She described consciousness freed from the limitations of flesh, minds that could span star systems, think at the speed of light, and exist in multiple realities simultaneously. The humans had built structures of pure thought that dwarfed their greatest physical achievements, but her report also revealed the cost. "You can remember your old life, but it feels distant, like childhood memories. The person you were seems small compared to what you become. Some find this beautiful, others find it terrifying." The galaxy split into two camps. The evolutionists, led by Archon Veltar himself, chose to follow humanity's path. They saw transcendence as the next natural step in consciousness development. The Remainers, led by Detective Keith and the scientific communities, refused to abandon their physical forms. They would fight the Harvesters with every weapon and strategy available. As the reality Harvesters moved deeper into inhabited space, their true horror became apparent. Rescue ships sent to evacuate threatened worlds returned with crews that existed in a nightmarish middle state, conscious but unable to fully exist in either reality. They could think and speak, but they couldn't touch or be touched. They remembered being alive but couldn't quite grasp what that had meant. "This is what happens when the transition fails," Zara warned. "The Harvesters don't destroy consciousness. They separate it from physical reality without providing a new foundation. Those crew members are trapped between states." The first major evacuation began from the manufacturing worlds of the outer ring. Trillions of beings fled toward the galactic core, but there was nowhere safe to run. The Harvesters moved steadily inward, unweaving reality at a pace that would reach the capital worlds within years, not decades. On the council station, Archon Veltar made the most difficult decision of his ancient life. "We will begin voluntary transcendence for any species that chooses it. The collective has agreed to guide the process using the technology at CERN. Those who wish to remain and fight are equally welcomed." The transcendence process began immediately. The energy beings of the ethereal realms went first, their natural state making the transition almost effortless. They dissolved into patterns of light that sang with joy before vanishing into dimensions beyond physical perception. The Shard Collective followed, their crystalline forms shattering into geometric patterns that reformed as pure consciousness. Each transcendence was different, some peaceful, others dramatic, all irreversible. Captain Rin led a group of younger species through the process. As she began to fade from physical reality, her last words were filled with wonder. "I can see them, the humans, the other transcended beings. They're building something incredible in the spaces between dimensions. But for every species that chose transcendence, another chose to remain." The builders of the Great Rings activated ancient defensive networks that spanned entire star systems. The warrior clans prepared for battles they couldn't win but wouldn't avoid. The peaceful worlds simply continued their daily lives, believing that acceptance was its own form of victory. Detective Keth found himself leading the largest scientific effort in galactic history. If physical resistance was impossible, perhaps they could find a way to coexist with the Harvesters or redirect their path. Thousands of species contributed their greatest minds to the project. "We've learned that the Harvesters operate on cycles," he reported to the Remainer Alliance. "They consume one galaxy, then move to the next. If we can prove that our consciousness has already evolved beyond their parameters, they might pass us by. It was a desperate hope, but it led to incredible innovations. The remaining species began merging their technologies and knowledge in ways never attempted before. Hive minds shared processing power with individualistic species. Energy beings taught matter-based life forms how to exist partially outside normal space-time. But even as they worked, the harvesters drew closer. Worlds at the galaxy's edge reported that space itself was becoming unstable. Stars flickered between existing and not existing. Planets phased in and out of reality. Time flowed backwards in some regions, making communication impossible. The breaking point came when the harvesters reached the Nexus worlds, the galaxy's communication and trade hub. As reality began unraveling around the massive space stations, millions of beings faced the final choice between transcendence and whatever lay beyond physical existence. Some chose transcendence at the last moment, their consciousness joining the vast network of evolved beings that existed beyond normal space. Others chose to remain until the absolute end, experiencing the strange dissolution that came when reality itself ceased to function. Detective Keth stood on his dying homeworld as the harvester's influence washed over everything he had ever known. The ground beneath his feet flickered between solid matter and empty space. The air tasted of colors that shouldn't exist. Time moved in spirals that made his logical mind struggle to maintain coherence. In his final moments of physical existence, he finally understood what the collective had tried to explain. The harvesters weren't destroyers. They were gardeners. Physical reality was just one layer of existence, like soil in a garden. When it became too dense with accumulated matter and energy, it needed to be broken down and recycled, the transcended. Beings, humanity, the ethereals, all the species that had chosen evolution, existed in the spaces between physical realities. They were the flowers that grew from the recycled soil of consumed galaxies. As his own consciousness began to separate from his dissolving form, Keth made his choice. Instead of fighting the transition or accepting oblivion, he reached out toward the network of transcended minds that surrounded his reality like invisible light. The last thing he experienced in physical form was a sensation of infinite expansion, as if he had been living in a small room his entire life, and had suddenly stepped outside to discover an endless universe waiting beyond the door. In the transcended realm, he found humanity waiting to welcome him. They had changed, grown beyond their original forms into something magnificent and strange, but they were still recognizably human in their chaotic, contradictory, wonderful way. "We knew you'd make it eventually," one of them said, though communication here happened through shared thought rather than words. "Everyone does, sooner or later. Some just take longer to realize that endings are really beginnings." Keth looked back at the galaxy he had left behind. From this perspective, he could see the pattern clearly. The harvesters moved through like cosmic seasons, breaking down old realities to make room for new forms of consciousness. What seemed like destruction from inside was actually creation from outside. New beings would evolve in other galaxies, face their own harvest, and choose between transcendence and recycling. The cycle would continue forever, consciousness growing more complex and beautiful with each iteration. The humans had been right to embrace the chaos. In a universe where change was the only constant, the ability to exist in multiple states simultaneously wasn't a weakness. It was the key to eternal survival. As the last physical matter in his home galaxy dissolved into quantum foam, Keth felt something he had never experienced as a purely logical being: perfect peace. The investigation was over. The mystery was solved. And the answer, as humanity had discovered, was that there had never been anything to fear. The end was always meant to be a beginning. In the transcended realm, consciousness continued to grow and evolve, building wonders that spanned dimensions and creating beauty beyond physical imagination. And somewhere in the vast network of transcended minds, humanity's chaotic laughter still echoed through the cosmic dance of eternal transformation.